right, so welcome back to the Jason and Peely Project. Excited for today's guest. We have Henry Daas on the show. Hey, Henry, how are you?
I'm great. How you doing, Jason?
Well, I'm doing great, and I really just love your setup. We talked a bit offline. If you're listening to this, you probably go over and check out the video. He's got quite the setup, and he said this is just the tip of the iceberg. But Henry is a serial entrepreneur, business coach, screenwriter, and self-described ordinary guy, and now a personal finance coach. Born in Brooklyn at the tail end of the Eisenhower years, lived his entire life in and around New York City, lived his life in and around money as well, from cutting lawns to a kid to managing stock portfolios as an adult. His consulting business, Daas Knowledge, helps professional coaching for entrepreneurs and business owners of companies with top line sales under 10 million. And he's got his debut book, which we're going to talk about today, FQ, Financial Intelligence. So, Henry, that does not sound like an ordinary guy. So
that sounds pretty good. It's almost like I wrote it myself. I mean,
So I'd have to say, well, I'll start there. Living in and around New York City, which Peely and I met in New York City. I lived in New York City myself for 13 years. I'm actually out in New Jersey now. There's so much talk about the people leaving New York City, right? And
yes,
James Altucher had the post that went pretty viral about New York City being dead. How do you feel about that statement?
Well, Jerry Seinfeld wrote an answer song to that, which I read in the New York Times. As Mark Twain so aptly said, rumors of my death are exaggerated. Yeah, I'm in the Seinfeld camp. I mean, you're living in a fool's paradise if you think that New York will not recover from this. I lived there for about 25 years. My wife is, born and raised in New York. I raised my kids there when they were little. I was on the street in 9/11 when we thought it was the end of the world. The city will recover. I'll even go further than that. The city will recover and will be better than it ever was. It's just going to take a little time.
Yeah, I agree. There's that draw to New York City that when you get there, you understand, but when you're
no other
afar,
place like it on earth. And I've been
correct.
all over the globe, and there is no other place like New York. So it's a body blow. It's a temporary setback. Look, I write an update I just posted it this morning. I call it the Daas FQ update. I write it every 2 weeks. And a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the real estate market, how I live in New Jersey like you, and the real estate market is one of the hottest that I've ever seen. It's absurd. I mean, it's actually a joke. And my wife and I are looking at real estate because we're leaving New Jersey. So we've been looking, we're moving to Vegas, but we're also looking to buy a place somewhere around New York just to kind of keep our feet here during the summer because it's too hot in Vegas. 15,000 empty rental units in New York City, including, my son is not empty. I mean, it's empty. We have a little apartment on Lexington Avenue. He went there because he got the COVID and he had to sequester himself, but now he's back here because there's nothing going on in the city. It's just a little dead. So
yeah, and I see that. And why the move to Vegas?
Vegas checks a lot of boxes. I loved living in New York. I loved having the easy access to all sorts of different activities. But I'd only do it infrequently, every once in a while. I mean, how often, we go to Broadway shows, but, once a year, maybe twice a year. Vegas has all that. I'm not a gambler. I really don't gamble, but I've been there many, many times, probably at least 20, 25 times. My wife and I got married there. January 1st will be our 30th anniversary. We got married on New Year's Eve in Vegas. It's a nice dropping off point to LA. We've got friends who I think are going to be moving to LA. My youngest son's in Utah. There's no taxes, right? I wrote a book called FQ Financial Intelligence. So there's no state or local taxes, not like here, high tax area. And my kids are all out of public schools, so I don't need to fund that anymore. And you're close to all the national parks, on and on. I sound like an ad for Las Vegas, but
good.
But it has a lot of attributes The only downside is it's breathtakingly hot during the summer.
Sure.
Which is why we'll need a place back here so we can get out of that hot weather, because my wife doesn't like the hot weather. So.
Yeah, I love that. And so talk to us. You mentioned the book, Financial Intelligence, 432 pages. Did I read that correct?
Yes. It's a beast. It's 120,000 words. Like people say, couldn't you make it shorter? Yeah. It's like, yeah, I could have made it shorter. It wouldn't have been as good.
Well, what drew you to start writing this book, and how did you start incorporating a book, and maybe was that the thought track that it was going to be such a large book to start with so much detail in it, or was once you started going, it just started flowing and you just had so much to put down?
The genesis is I was at a conference in Bangkok. I was at a mastermind table with a bunch of other coaches. We were talking about group coaching. We were talking about our Jim Collins, BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goals. So I said, I really want to create a course to do group coaching in finance. Use my 40 years of experience in and around money to write a cradle to grave compendium of everything and anything I know about money to help people. Because it's a mystery for a lot of folks. So they kind of looked at me and it's like, dude, you ain't getting any younger. You might want to get on that. And I took that swift kick in the butt and I went back home and I wrote the entire thing in 50 days. I wrote an 18 chapter table of contents. And in 50 days, I wrote 96,000 words, and I wrote it as a course. And then I got a dozen people to volunteer to take the course, and I went through all the course material, and I was all ready to go. And then a bunch of people said, dude, this is a book. You need to make this a book. That's your lead magnet. And that sent me down the self-publishing rabbit hole, which took about a year, hiring copy editors. What's a copy editor? Hiring people, I just dragged infographics. There's 250 infographics in the book, which is one of the reasons it's so large. And I just dragged them off the internet. I found them on the St. Louis Fed website here and there. I never gave a thought that this would ever be printed. And then my designer, who laid the whole thing out in InDesign, said, these aren't going to work. They have to be 300 DPI, this, that. So I found a guy on Fiverr that a friend of mine referred me to. And for $10 a graphic, he converted it into vector files, and I'm like, wow, that was easy. So,
yeah. Sometimes the ease, right? I think a lot of talk, especially when you're doing your business, you have to understand the roles that you need to play in, right? And instead of trying to figure out every space, like I'm going to go figure out how to change that graphic into this, where you would have spent hours of your time on that, right?
Not going to do that. I'm going to hire. There's a million people on Upwork and Fiverr, and I just hired 2 people off of Hire My Mom. To help me with some stuff. There's a million people out there, fractional folks, freelancers. But the first time you do something, it's like the same thing when we're talking about entrepreneurship, because your flock are young business people, and many of them are on their first business. And the learning curve is really steep, right? But then I'm writing another book right now, which is a business book. And now I know all the things. I don't know everything, but I know a lot of the stuff that I didn't know. It's not a mystery anymore. Right? I've driven that route before, so it doesn't seem like it's taking me forever. Oh, I've done this before.
Talk to me about some of the takeaways from your life as a serial entrepreneur. What were some of the things that drew you to the businesses that you started, and what were some of the lessons along that route? I'm sure there's plenty so maybe the top 4 or 5 that stand out.
Yeah, so I started my first business 30 years ago, 1991. I started it as a side hustle. And I describe businesses in 2 ways, and I'm writing about this in my book. There are really 2 flavors of origin story. There is the accidental business, as I call it. The shinier name for that would be opportunistic. And then there's the purposeful business, the one where you actually sat down and wrote a business plan or had an idea about what it is that you wanted to do. So my first business was called Abacus Solutions. We were a computer reseller. We became a Apple computer value-added reseller. People would say, what's your value add? It's like me. You want to buy stuff from me. Pretty much that was our secret sauce. And I had a friend of mine, college friend, and he worked for a leasing company, and he was having trouble sourcing Macs for one of his Fortune 500 clients. And I said, let me take a crack at it. And I just kind of went out and bought them retail and reconfigured them and boxed them up and shipped them. And I made a couple of bucks, and then he just kept, funneling low-hanging fruit. And after a year and a half, I'd done $600,000 worth of business. And I looked at my wife and I said, I'm quitting my job and giving up my gold-plated, retirement plan and health plan, and I'm going to hang up a shingle and never look back.
Wow. And what's been your favorite business you've started?
My favorite business was around 2003. I started a home theater business. So we did home automation. That's when flat screens were first coming out. So people were throwing out their old CRTs, and they were super expensive. They were thousands of dollars. And home automation, Crestron, a new company called Control 4 came out in like 2005, 2006. I became a dealer for that. Love that stuff. Super tech. We'd go in and people would spend $100,000 teching their house out, doing lighting control, this, that, and the other thing. It was the funnest business. It was also the worst imaginable business on the planet. Because the contingent liabilities for maintaining these systems, they're super complicated. Yeah. So we had housekeepers in New York City. They would knock the little mouse emitter off of the TV, right? That's the thing that flashes the TV to turn it on. We'd have to roll a truck and have a service call. That's not our fault. And what am I going to do? Charge them $500 for, which is roughly what I should have charged for that service call? Can't really do that because you're working in a referral business. You want people to sell for you, be your advocate.
Yeah, I can see it. It takes one wrong kid to touch the remote control and hit the wrong button.
Actually, no, one wrong adult.
Right,
I loved it. I used to say, look, I want clients with kids in the house.
Yeah.
Kids became my lifeblood, right? They knew how to use the remote. So they were like a built-in support staff. Have a 12-year-old in the house, it's great. Older couple, oh man, we are in such trouble with that.
I can see that. It's quickly the thing to go. So how do you identify opportunities today? What is it that really stands out to you with all this experience? You say, okay, this is the direction I want to go.
Well, today it's, everything has shifted with the internet. I mean, 91, there was no internet. I still remember when we got our first ISDN line. Right. It's really dating it. I think it was 1.5 megabits. Wow. They actually, the ISP gave us a Class C, it's actually a C+3 address. What does that mean for the non-techies? They gave us 64 static IPs. That's what came with our package. And when I say static IPs, I mean of all the IPs in the world, and there's not that many, we got 64 of them. Wow. That was before everything changed with NAT and other stuff. Now now you got to pay extra money just to get one static IP. They gave us a C+3 64 static IPs. Yeah. So every computer was a static IP on the internet, which was a riot, but it was dreadfully slow. And we lived through the whole first generation, whole dot bomb, 99, 2000, 2001. That whole run up where people were going crazy building websites and VCs were throwing money at the most cockamamie ideas on the planet. And then that all exploded. And then we went through 2000 when I was in the home theater business. People kind of rebuilt that internet, and that really changes how you market. We grew up, my business partner and I, my first business partner, just leveraging our personal relationships, right? We had thick Rolodexes and we knew people. And that's how we did stuff. Now you can just start a business and you don't need any of that. Do some Facebook ads, go on LinkedIn, do PPC, or you could start an FBA business. I'm not sure what your listeners do. FBA meaning fulfilled by Amazon, or an affiliate business. But there's a downside to that because now your sales you're playing in someone else's sandbox, right? So your sales are coming through a channel that, forget about control, you don't even have an influence on.
Yeah. All right, so Keely and I are all about large multifamily, but we are here today because there was an event that kicked off our real estate career and we want to bring it to you.
It is called Flip Hacking Live. I know the name says flipping, but hear us out. This was the quintessential event that kick-started our careers in real estate.
So it gave us everything we use today. It gave us marketing, how to talk to investors, how to really build our base and build our team that we use today to really do what we do in large multifamily. And that's why we're bringing you this special discount. If you go to Flip Hacking Live today and you put in JP, tickets which just went up to $397. Well, they're going to give you $100 off that we're going to pay for because that's how much we believe in this event.
So go there, go to the link, click on it, learn about it, and go to this event. You will not be sorry.
Let's do this.
Right.
Yeah.
That's extremely risky. As risky as it is to bootstrap a business and start it up from scratch and try to leverage your personal contract, it's even riskier when the sales and marketing aspect of your business is tethered to a gigantic company that, let's face it, they don't give a crap about you.
And so how do you stand out today?
It's tough doing things like this, you know, trying to become a thought leader or an influencer. I still don't know what an influencer is. I got 3 boys and they can't seem to they're millennials. I guess one's a Gen Z. I don't know. I can't keep track of it. I don't know why they started the gens at X and then Y and then Z, because now we run out of letters.
Exactly. You start at the end. Where do you go? Yep.
Well, there's a Dr. Seuss book about the letters that go past Z. I think Wuz is the next one. So the next kids who are born will be Generation Wuz. Maybe somebody in Generation Wuz can explain to me what an influencer is, because I look at it and I scratch my head and it's like, do you do anything? I mean, it reminds me of the stars who used to be on the Hollywood squares. You know, Charles Nelson Riley. Is he just famous for being famous? Or did he actually do something? I'm dating myself.
Funny.
Wally Cox, you know.
Anyway. That's funny. You actually think about it today is that, you know, with the availability out there, I mean, there's just so much information, right? And that's part of the downside, is just trying to create a message. And it gets to the point where if you reach the mass audience, can you have a viable message to them, right? Or is it just a click through, where if you can reach a targeted audience, hopefully you can help them to that next stage? And with your book here, what are some of the proponents that people should really dive into the book for, that can really give them an overlay of some of the main topics that are missing in today's society?
Well, everything, bad word, non-coaching word. Shouldn't say everything. Shouldn't use black and white words. Much of the stuff that's out there doesn't have any substance. It's just skimming along the surface. One of the reasons that the book is so big is because I don't want to skim along the surface, because everybody else is already doing that. So I want to dive a little bit deeper, and I tend to be a contrarian. So a lot of what I bring up is, this is what the mass market is telling you. It's just not true. So a simple example. There's an old saying that if you're investing in the stock market, that the percentage of your wealth should be 100 minus your age. So if you're 61 years old like me, I should not have more than 39% of my money in the stock market. That's just an old, adage that they use to market. That's nonsensical thinking. It just makes. There's no relation to reality. I was on a podcast yesterday. I was talking about FIRE, which is financial independence, retire early, right?
Yeah.
I didn't write really nice things about it in my book. In fact, I said, look, this is the kind of stuff that comes out of academia. Try doing it in practice. Try taking 4% for the next 25 years, retiring at 29. And putting a bunch of money away. What happens when you have a pandemic? The ironic thing is, at the beginning of the pandemic, I read an article in the New York Times about all these people who were implementing FIRE and were now out looking for part-time jobs because it didn't quite work out. So, one of my watchwords is avoid all that noise. Turn all that noise down. Start at the beginning. Chapter 1, Psychology of Money. Are you living in scarcity? Are you living in abundance? Or are you somewhere between those goalposts? You need to figure out for yourself, and you hire somebody like me or a coach, same in entrepreneurship. How are you going to run your business, right? Most people, I'd say the majority of people, live in scarcity.
Sure.
They do. They just do. They're risk averse. Then there's a few folks who are on the opposite spectrum who are constantly gambling and constantly losing, right? Feast or famine. You want to be kind of somewhere in the middle. There's a time for scarcity and there's a time for abundance. You really want to try to live as abundant a life as you can. But first you got to be aware of your tendencies, your patterns. So I talk a lot about patterns. I have a pattern of talking about patterns. And that's where we start. That's what we figure out. The first 6 chapters, I look at the book as 3 acts because I'm a screenwriter. So the first act is figure out your tendencies. I do something that I call the thick green line that kind of traces the arc of your net worth versus your age. Because many people will get to the age of 30 and realize that they have a 0 or a negative net worth. They've accumulated no assets whatsoever. May have a whole load of student debt. Maybe they got a little money in a retirement account, but if you net it all out, my wife and I, when we got married, I was 31, she was 28, 29. We had a net worth of exactly $0 when we got married in 1991.
Wow.
And within 6 years, we had a net worth over $1 million.
There you go.
And we've never had a net worth less than that since then, in the ensuing 25 years.
What were some of the key changes you made from getting married to those 6 years to start yourself on that journey?
Well, I would have loved to have been dinky, dual income, no kids, but my son Matthew was born, 10 months and 9 days after we got married. So he wasn't a honeymoon baby, but he was close. But still, we both had good jobs. We lived in New York City, but we lived in a pretty tiny 1-bedroom apartment with the crib at the foot of the bed, and it was $1,000 a month. And we were making about 150 grand a year between the two of us. And so we lived way below our means.
Correct.
We could have rented a $3,000 a month apartment if we wanted to. We had the cash flow to do it. But I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So we sacrificed for 4 years. We saved a bunch of money and we bought a loft apartment on Fifth Avenue. When did we closed, I think, end of 92. Talk about people moving out of New York. That was the middle of the crack epidemic in 1992. That was the highest murder rate in the city. Over 2,600 people were murdered in New York City. That's like 5 a day in 92. And my parents were looking at me like, you want to do what? You want to buy an apartment in New York City and put roots down? And that's kind of kooky. But as it turned out, we bought at the bottom. We didn't know.
One of those things where you do something that most people, they just don't want to do, and that's maybe live below their means for a couple of years. But it can really, and that's what it is. Like, I don't want to potentially take away from what my lifestyle, whatever that so is, so I can live better for the rest of my life. And so many times we get stuck. Okay, I make more, so I spend more. So, and then I'm spending too much, and I gotta figure out how to make more. And it's that revolving wheel. You're never quite anywhere except exactly where you are. Because if you're making $1 and spending $1, or you're making 1 million and spending 1 million, you're basically in the same spot.
You have to, I kept a very, crooked eye on the money, and we had some fights and some arguments about that. I think at the time, my wife disagreed with the strategy. Felt we were making too much of a, dare I use the S word, sacrifice. But about 10 years after we bought that apartment, I overheard her talk to somebody about what we did, and she was proud of it. So I'm like, yeah, I succeeded. She would never say it to me, of course, but she said it to a third party, and I said, all right, so our strategy worked.
Yeah.
But in reality, to some degree, we're still a couple of just dumb kids, buying in New York City during the middle of a crack and murder epidemic. Yeah. And it was a crummy apartment that needed a renovation. I had to borrow 50 grand. I borrowed 50 grand from her boss on a handshake.
Wow.
He just gave me, he said, yeah, sure. And I paid him back. I paid him some interest. It's like, we were, kind of a couple nutty kids, but it worked out very well.
So for people out there today that see your book and know that they're not in the right spot, give us the through message for the book. Why should they go out and get that book today?
Well, the main reason is I give it away for free. So if you go to my website, if you go to bookbaby.dasknowledge.com, that's the landing page. You can download it for 100% off. Because I discovered as a self-publisher that marketing a book, there are about 2 million books that go on Amazon alone every year. It's tough.
Wow.
Talk about a crowded space in the internet, trying to get a patch of land for yourself. It's tough. So I give it away. I want people to read it. There's a lot of valuable information in there. There's something for everybody at every age.
Yeah.
I was originally going to call it Financial Intelligence for the Sandwich Generation, and I pitched that title to my wife, and she said, "Oh, I really like that. What's the sandwich generation?" So I said, yeah, that's not the first thing I want people to think about, but it really is aimed towards people who have young children and aging parents, and they're sandwiched in between. They're trying to pay their mortgage, save for retirement, pay health care. They're trying to put money away for their kids' college, and they're also worried about grandma and grandpa. Did they save enough money?
Correct.
And it's tough sometimes to have that money conversation with your parents. My parents were very closed-mouthed about money. The only time I found out about their money situation was when my father died in 2000. And I spent a week with a spreadsheet and a laptop figuring out their money situation. And I was relieved afterwards that they weren't destitute, because they never really shared much of anything. They were very frugal. They drove cars until the fenders fell off. It's like, our neighbors are buying new cars. Why don't we buy a new car? Well, this one's paid for, and it still works. Right. I'll tell you a funny story. My mother called me. She refused to get a cell phone for years and years. And so she called me and she said, I got this weird number coming up. And it's like, it's my mom. It's like, what's this number you're calling from? Oh, I got a phone. Really? Why'd you get a phone, Ma? She said, well, the car's got 175,000 miles on it, and I'm worried that I might break down somewhere and need to call somebody. And I said, Ma, you don't need a phone. You need a new car.
That's right. I love it. Well, Henry, I love the message. I want to dive into the book. Everyone here listening today, you can benefit from a book like this that can teach you to be better at money, because no one out there can say that, oh, I'm bad with money. That's not an excuse you can make and that you should make ever. Everyone can be better with their money. And a lot of it just comes down to understand where's your money going. And I'm sure that's a lot of the topics in the book today. So
Henry, a lot of it.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Go out there, get the book. It's over at bookbaby.dasknowledge, Daas Knowledge, DAAS knowledge.com. You can find that across all the social platforms as well. Thank you so much for being on the show. I love it.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. For everyone listening, thank you. Talk to you shortly.
Join us for your second cup of coffee every Monday through Friday at noon.
Live every day, bringing us our best content we've done so far. Super excited, super engaging, bunch of great guests. We're here to answer your questions, and we so appreciate you listening. Make sure to check this out.
Can't wait to see you.